So I want to show you guys some cool tips and tricks and just overall gems on how to make your brass melodies sound just This next plugin that I want to show you guys is a serious gem. Making this pre-chorus, it didn't take very long. What's up guys, Kaze here of KazeBeat.com. Welcome to the new video. Thanks so much for being patient with me. My girlfriend's family kind of had a COVID situation, and unfortunately some people were sent to the hospital. But after 2 weeks, they just arrived back home yesterday. Everyone is getting better, they're on the recovery process. It was just very hectic and chaotic for the past 2 weeks, and I just had to take some time off to try to focus on that. We are all happy and reunited, so that means more content. Anyways, today I'm going to be showing you guys how Turbo makes new Atlanta beats for Gunna and Lil Baby. The Atlanta sound was pioneered by artists such as Young Thug and Future. 808s were longer, and a lot of the melodies consisted of Nexus and Omnisphere pads, presets, bells, synths, that sort of thing. But today, as I'm sure you've noticed, the sound is evolving with artists like Lil Baby and Gunna. We've been seeing the use of more strings, brass, flutes, guitars, etc. And overall, it's been really cool seeing how the sound is evolving. In this tutorial, we're going to be referencing songs like Hot by Young Thug and Top Shelf by Gunna, which was co-produced by Turbo. In this tutorial, you're going to learn keys to creating simple yet catchy melodies, keys to creating and mixing brass melodies, keys to the best drum kits and sounds to use, how to structure beats and use pre-choruses to make signals for your artists, and several other tips and tricks along the way. So if this sounds good to you, let's go ahead and get into it. We're setting the tempo to 115 BPMs. The key that we're using is going to be D flat major. I love that key. So I want to show you guys some cool tips and tricks and just overall gems on how to make your brass melodies sound just amazing. Some of my favorite brass instruments to use comes from the Contact Bank. It's called Session Horns. There's a version called Session Horns Pro, which looks amazing, but I don't have enough money for it right now, so we're just kind of using the light version. This will definitely do for all intents and purposes. What you can do with this bank is select the specific instruments that you want playing at the same time. So this is the full section. It just sounds like this. And every section comes with articulations, and they're actually a good bit of articulations. So let's check out Shake. So what I'm going to be doing is getting my articulations and changing the sections around, bouncing the melodies, and then just layering them so that we can create like a full brass ensemble. I'm going to get a simple pattern down and then show y'all some major gems. The first tip that I got for you guys is to think about how brass players play their instruments. They use their breath, and your breath is not an unlimited resource. You have to take breaths in between notes, especially longer notes. One of the biggest mistakes that I used to make when building trumpet melodies and just brass in general is I wouldn't think about that breath element, and so I would have long notes that just sound like this. But that's not very realistic. So if you're clicking in your melodies, just make sure that you have some gaps in between each note to try to replicate that feeling of breathing in. The next thing that you should think about is how an ensemble is set up. One terrible thing I used to do was just build chords with one brass instrument. Don't play piano melodies with your brass instruments. You have to think from a band's point of view in an ensemble. So you have to select several different instruments like tenor saxes, piccolo trumpets, trombones, tubas, whatever. They all have to be doing their own thing in the band. So that's how we're going to start building out this melody. So one thing I can do is change the articulation. I like soft sustain. The next section setup I'm choosing is going to be on a lower register, so we're going to go an octave down on the keys. I'm using the saxophone and the tuba. Let's make the articulation shorter, so we're going to pick staccatissimo, like staccato, but for brass. I'm going to get this last brass pattern in just to support the main melody. So I'm going to go back to my MIDI, take this melody, copy it, and paste it back in here. When your brass begins sounding really tinny, you can drop some of the instruments down an octave. So this drop first is going to lower this trumpet down 1 octave. I think that's what it does. We can also drop the first and second. And this is actually giving us a more full sound to the brass. So we're going to keep the drop first, drop second. So now we've got this ensemble kind of going. You can just imagine the different horn sections doing their own thing. It just has that fake tinny sound, so we can turn on an EQ and just roll off some of that high end. You should also be adding some low passes. We want to take out as much of that low end as possible so that we have enough space for our 808s and bass. What I've done here is I've taken all of our brass ensembles and I linked it to this one bus, and I added Valhalla Room, so check this out. The only thing to point out is turn your mix to about halfway. You don't want to completely send your brass sounds to the very back of the mix, and the depth I'm going relatively easy on it. We're at like 27%. So that's pretty easy. Just with the use of one plugin, we're suddenly sounding not so fake. So let's try to add on some saturation, just a little bit. We're gonna use FabFilter Saturn, and you're probably gonna wanna put this plugin before you put the room reverb on. And we're gonna go ahead and put another parametric EQ down at the bottom here so that we can catch any generated harmonics and frequencies that we don't want. Just gonna take off a good bit of that high end. One more thing, there should be one more thing to add. What should it be? Just out of curiosity, I wanna see what RC20 will do to this. So here's before RC20. And here's after RC20. To recap on everything that we just did, I'm going to take off all these effects so you guys can listen to the raw sound. We got this. So let's turn all the effects on, and then you'll see the sauce. What I did after that was I took all of this and I bounced it into one single melody. Then I loaded that melody into Edison. Up at the top left, you see sample rate. I right-clicked this and I changed the sample rate to 22,050 and made sure that the resample button was on. I hit accept, and then I just drag and drop this into the playlist. And what this does is it lowers the quality of the overall sound. In doing so, it also gets rid of some frequencies that could cause some muddiness, and it gives a more vintage vibe to the melody as a whole. The next thing I want to do is add in some drums, and then I'll add in some other melody elements. We're going to start off with the 808. You definitely want to use a Manny Zay 808. It could be modified, it could be the original. I'm going to use this hi-hat. It's called the Feather hi-hat. It comes from an 808 Mafia kit. I just changed the output a little bit, so we're cutting off some of that tail there. And I'm just going to right click and do a 2-step pattern. So next I'll put in some claps. The specific clap I'm using is Jerk, and this actually comes from a AP kit. It's way overused, but we're gonna have to do a reverse 808. There's nothing really special to the perks, just add them in where you don't have too many 808s going on. Look for the spots that come before and after the snare, and then leading up to the next bar. I was browsing through Omnisphere and I couldn't find any sounds that inspired me. Then I remembered this old patch that I made like almost 2 years ago. It's crazy how old this thing is. This comes from a sample called Noisy Pulse, and for some reason I named it Oboe. This This next plugin that I want to show you guys is a serious gem. This is called the Aphex Vintage Aural Exciter by Waves. It's called an exciter, so in a way, it's kind of like saturation, but it's also not. I don't know what exact algorithms that this plugin in particular uses to make sounds cleaner. It has an amazing ability to clean up some muddy frequencies on the low end and just make your sounds shiny and super clean. To make things simple, you should start out with a preset. I like to use a PA default, and then I just turn up the AX mix, which is this knob, till it sounds good. This is our Omnisphere sound without any effects on. I'm hearing a little bit of like a fuzz or a distortion, so I'm gonna turn it down to about 8. I opened up Arcade by Output and I found this new preset. It's called Everworld, and I'm gonna go ahead and favorite this. Just like we did for the brass melody, we're gonna drop the sample rate for this. So I'm in Edison, I'm gonna right click, hit resample. Let's try 7,000. I shortened the intro and it's just 4 bars. After that 4th bar, we're just boom, right into the hook. So we got this hook going on for 8 bars, and then we move into the verse right here. I also lowered the pitch of this brass section by an octave, so it sounds like this. Making this pre-chorus, it didn't take very long. Sometimes producers will add in another melody that's unique but kind of similar from the verse. So an easy way is to just get rid of some melodies, maybe add an effect. You could add a filter, take away the drums, just leave this section for an artist to like say something, have a transition. The advantage of this is it gives variation, but it also adds more depth to your beat. It kind of adds like a little extra side story, a nice breathing point for the artist, and a very catchy way to signal that we're getting back into the hook or going on to a new section. That wraps up this tutorial. Thank you guys so much for your patience and sticking with me to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this, then drop a guas down in the comments. Game was a success so that I know who the real ones are. Hit me up on IG at KazeBeat if you have any questions. And lastly, I've been talking about making a drum kit, a melody kit with Ron Da Vinci, which is still gonna drop, but we gotta hit 1K subs first. So if you haven't subbed and you're at this part of the video, then please go ahead and help your boys out. Thanks again, guys. Please stay safe. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's if I don't see you until then. And as always, I will see you soon. Take care.